networking goes back many years, right? That's why people join country clubs. My grandfather joined a country club and he had to drive from Niagara Falls to Williamsville, New York, which is just a suburb outside of Buffalo. But there was no throughway to get there. So the drive to get there was took this long. Well, there was no email, there was no social media. So if you wanted to get around other people and you're in the insurance business, well, you got to get in your car and drive those places. And it might take an hour. It's just different. We can have a conversation with someone in Cleveland, Ohio, someone in California, someone in Belgium, and things have changed, and it's changed so fast in all of this, and it's just moving really fast. Like, I don't even know where podcasting goes from here, because it had changed, like, say 5 years ago, 10 years ago, like where we are today and where it's going. And now there are a lot of people with podcasts. I've heard the number's 2 million. I'm sure it's more. Most podcasts are not active.
Right.
And what's the ultimate end goal of someone having a podcast or having a YouTube channel or having a website and having all of these things? And it's just makes you think.
Yeah, it does. That's really cool. I didn't know about that. That's a great point. But that's also how human beings operate. That's how we evolve and we thrive. We're genetically designed.
It just happens faster than it did before.
Yeah, I guess I'd want to think about that, because I hear everybody say that too. It's like, we make these connections faster, but
the initial connection happens faster.
Sure. Yeah. It's more like I become aware of you as a person on Earth.
This is a small world. All of a sudden you start having, you're like, wow, this is different, right? Like you meet someone and you're like, oh my God, we're from the same hometown. And you just didn't know that.
Well, I think, the other thing too is that we still, no matter how big the world is or how small it seems that it is because of social media, human beings, we still operate in tribes, right? So the story like with Laurel and, Chad, and I was talking about being introduced to Dov, and I could really trace, I've told people too, as some of the most significant people in my life today, I can trace them all back to Dov, for example, right? Well, I never would have met Dov if I had not been on Chris's podcast, if I had not been introduced to Chris from Chad, who was also on that podcast, right? And then that's how with you and Laurel, when you have these small groups of people that you trust and you're actually paying attention to what it is they need. As I was talking to Laurel when I was spending several days up there with Chad and Laurel, learning more about what she did. And then, of course, you and I being friends, which you still haven't admitted publicly. I hope you do so on this podcast, but it's neither here or there. But, in my hope that you would be my friend one day, I knew that was like, you guys should meet, you should connect, because I knew that was something you were looking for. But I don't do that for everybody. I have to have like a deep enough, more intimate knowledge of you and what's important to you. And
that takes time.
And that's where like a smaller tribal type of setting is. It's like family. We do not have the capacity to know what's important to everybody. I mean, I have 11,000 some odd followers on LinkedIn. How many of those people do I actually know? Not that many. It's a handful, right? Yeah. So we can be aware of each other.
It takes time. It's not a transaction.
It's not.
And I know you've been in the insurance business.
11 years I was, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I get it. There's relationship building in all industries, right?
Oh, yeah.
But in many points in that, there's a transaction that's taking place.
Sure.
And the transactions are very different depending on what insurance industry or what branch of insurance that you're in. But I always found it interesting because it was like, how many policies did you sell this month?
Mm-hmm.
It's very different than saying, I'm going to build a website. I'm going to put some content on there. I'm going to have a blog. I'm going to do a podcast. Maybe I'll have some social media. It's very difficult. I get it from many business owners' perspectives or someone who's like at that entrepreneurial mind, even if they're like, hey, selling real estate, it takes time.
Mm-hmm.
Like you mentioned it before, like, is the ultimate goal to get clients to come to you so they buy from you? Maybe. It doesn't have to be. Like it could just be, I just want to learn new things. I'm exploring. I want to discover something that I never thought about I could discover. And by having these conversations when everyone's phones are put away, I can find some stuff out. But like, it's been interesting because I still have that business, but spending a lot of time in it, it's very transactional.
Yeah.
And while it's still a relationship, it's very transactional.
But the transactional side on the insurance business is always at the end. It doesn't mean at the end of a relationship. It's that.
Right. Because you usually buy it multiple times. I get all that. But there's no, like on a podcast, I get it. If you're building a podcast to have an audience to then sell ad space to.
Yeah.
That I get, that's there. I'm just talking about like, if you're just having a conversation, where does it go to? Right? Like it might lead to no business at all.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have a hard time saying, why do you spend any time doing that? How does that lead to anything?
Yeah. Well, I would say this, I always told this early on when I moved from the insurance business to consulting, advising, training, teaching, all that. And that is that you want to build your body of work. So you want to create something, do a podcast, do videos, blog, write, you're building a body of work. And there's no downside to that, unless you're just measuring like, well, if this doesn't turn into a piece of business, then it's not worth it. Well, yeah, it's a short-sighted view. But if you have an entire body of work, if something, your work and your value and what it is, not just your ideas, but your capabilities, they're on full display. And that's something I think people forget, is that, for instance, if you go to my site, and I don't have any of the old videos up, but I've shared those with some folks that I've helped when trying to talk them through communicating and creating a video, for example, which is not my primary business, right? But it's just one of those things of, hey, here's how I learned. They're always like, well, it's going to look so bad and this and that. I was like, let me send you my early stuff. It's still up there on YouTube and whatnot. I said, it's garbage. And they're like, oh, well, this wasn't so bad. I was like, no, just listen. It sounds like I'm saying something. Can you tell me what I'm talking about? Because I sure can't. I'm not saying shit. I'm just using a lot of big words and being vague about something. It's like, you have to be okay with it. Like, you have to create shit to get to the good stuff. The stuff I create now, I mean, is it the best it will ever be? No, but it's really good. And I have no qualm saying this. Like, I spent 5 years overhauling my business, creating a digital side of the business to learn. I know how to create courses, to create automations, build in mechanisms. That's not my business, but I wanted to understand this. I wanted to master these skills. Now, ironically, they may come in quite handy, externally from my own business at some point. But it's also something that I knew that if I can create this, it also raises the perspective or the perception, better yet, of somebody coming to the site to better understand who I am, what I do, and why, and if I'm the person they should engage with. Because we still are very much, hey, first impressions. This is where that 1.5 seconds of attention span comes in. That's really the attention for your first impression. So if you create high quality stuff, or if they come there and they like what they see real quick, then that may get them to stick around for a 3-hour conversation, right? Maybe that leads to business, maybe it doesn't. But I have yet relationships that are more than just, yes, there's definitely relationships or conversations you have with people and you're like, hey, go nowhere. And by nowhere, I mean, you never talk again. And that's fine. But those are few and far between. The more honed in you are on the kind of people you want to be around, I think that becomes less and less of a problem. I think that's been my experience. And I have yet to see any relationship that falls into that category where we still have many conversations. That always grows into something else. It's an introduction somewhere else. You're in the psyche of the other person and vice versa.
Well, there's a belief in whatever it is that you're doing, because that's the difference. I have a product here and I can sell you that product.
Right.
Whether I sell it to you or not, I can go to the next person, I can sell them a product.
Sure.
There's a transaction in there somewhere. Eventually I'll get it, right?
Yeah.
If I talk to enough people. In this, it's even a longer term belief. Like, you might be doing this for a long time and it's not really going anywhere, but you believe in it. People are telling you maybe they're not going to like it.
Yeah.
I don't agree with the system that you have in place. That's fine.
Yeah.
Right? If I say, no, I don't want to talk to you just because you've been featured in all these things before, you could be offended. Chances are I would suggest that they just move on and go do something else. Like, why are you wasting your time? Right? Just continue on. But I think there's also this, when you create your body of work, it's the ultimate back check, right? You apply for a mortgage, you're going through underwriting. They have to check your background, your finances, all of these things. Content is your back check. It's your personal branding or whatever word. I know that's a bad word, whatever it is. If I can understand, like, if we're producing a podcast for somebody, I could sit there and tell them what we do and how we do it and all these types of things. Exactly. You know what? Here's episodes we've done for ourselves, for other people. If you don't like it, then I would suggest don't call us back. If you do like it, then let's talk. And it's not for everybody. And we're not trying to work with everybody.
Exactly.
But what an ultimate way to show proof of concept.
Yeah.
That's how it works. Yeah. And that's how the content, and you don't have to do podcast production to show proof of concept, but you can talk about whatever it is. If you're an attorney, if I could hear your thoughts on these legal matters or these stories, like, what better way to do it than reading about things that you believe in and think about? And that gets to learn more about you and how you think about things. And a lot of times there's a tie into that. Yeah. Like you mentioned the Cleveland Browns earlier, but it's an ultimate icebreaker.
Yeah.
Even if I hate the Browns, I could be a Steelers fan, right? There's this terrible towel in here. That's Shane and Mitch, right? They're the big Steelers fans. But that is the icebreaker because we can talk about that.
Of course.
And maybe I am a Browns fan. Well, then we have something in common and we can catch up on the Browns. My dad grew up in Cleveland, right?
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
Content Matterz with a Z is our content marketing company that helps entrepreneurs tell their own stories to those who care. And here's the thing. We think every entrepreneur that is willing should have their own content platform. And we want to help make that happen. both by working directly with entrepreneurs and by sharing our own stories, exploring the craft of content marketing. Content Matters, one piece of content at a time. Learn more at CasContent.com.